boarding facility and event center in Larkspur, Colorado. But he has had quite an adventurous path prior to this. Mr. Ellis served for over 20 years as a United States Marine Corps officer. Mr. Ellis is a naval aviator and flew the AH-1 attack helicopter. Ellis led a Marine combat and peacekeeping mission support in Somalia and the Persian Gulf, participating in Operation Ceasefire, Southern Watch, Restore Hope, and Continue Hope. Lieutenant Colonel Ellis commanded an unmanned aerial vehicle squadron supporting the President's counter-drug efforts along the southern border of the U.S. He retired from active duty in 2001. Mr. Ellis joined Raytheon in 2001 as a government contractor, and from 2001 to 2008 he served as a program manager for Raytheon Intelligence and Information Systems. After 9/11, Mr. Ellis directly supported the Joint Intelligence Task Force combating terrorism at the Defense Intelligence Agency. Mr. Ellis served from 2008 to 2012 as Director of Operations for Raytheon Polar Services for the United States Antarctic Program. Mr. Ellis served as the Senior Program Manager supporting human space flight mission operations at NASA, managing the Neutral Buoyancy Lab and Space Vehicle Mock-up Facility at Johnson Space Center. As a Raytheon Program Director, Mr. Ellis served supporting operations and maintenance of the NORAD Cheyenne Mountain Complex and the Integrated Tactical Warning and Attack Assessment and Space Support Program. Mr. Ellis is married to Phyllis Friday Ellis, and they have 5 daughters, including our Mrs. Salazar, 3 grandchildren, and a granddaughter on the way due this April. And now Mr. Ellis to speak on Fortitude.
So I think our granddaughter, you guys, she's over there. Can't tell you all how much I appreciate being invited here. I think I was here about 4 or 5, 6 years ago, 6 years ago. Thanks, Meg. And I spoke a little bit about Antarctica then. And the school's come so far since then. I'm so impressed with this school and everything that you all get a chance to do. The houses, the core virtues, they're amazing. I wish I would have had this opportunity when I was going through high school and middle school. So we'll talk a little bit about, rather than definitions of fortitude, let's talk about adventures in fortitude. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means to me, and the basis really of fortitude is, can you guys back up one? Okay, just stay there for a minute. So fortitude really is the combination of physical courage and moral courage. There are great thinkers who have spent a lot of time defining fortitude for us. Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas. I'm actually trying to read Thomas Aquinas' book right now. But when you think about the combination of physical and moral courage, that's fortitude. So, fortitude protects your integrity. It protects your character. We'll talk a little bit about that as we move on. Now you can go to the next slide. So for all of us, the basis of this fortitude, it comes from our own self-respect and self-confidence. So what do I mean by that? So your self-confidence is what protects your integrity and gives you moral courage, right? So self-confidence, self-respect. You have self-respect, you can respect your peers, your fellow students, your teachers, but that all starts with self-respect and self-confidence. So I'll talk a little bit more about this. Fortitude will continue to define how you live your lives. And where am I next? Go to the next slide. So it's kind of challenging. Always remember though, family, friendships, camaraderie, your reputation, your team's reputation, your fellow students' reputation, your school's reputation, and your character. It's a lot harder nowadays with social media. It's anonymous. It's faceless, it's nameless, and it's faster than the speed of light. So it's hard to maintain some moral and physical courage in the realm of social media. So let's talk a little bit about some adventures in Fortitude that I've experienced. The first one I'm going to talk about really is probably the most relevant. So they talked in the introduction about I had 5 daughters. We moved around almost every 3 years to a new city. So when we settled finally in a city, I think our 2 oldest daughters were in college. We had 2 in high school and 1 in grade school. So this story is about one of my daughters in high school. So we'd only been living there 6 months a year. She had new friends. She asked if she could go to a party. I took her to the party. It was a new environment, a tough time for her. I dropped her off at the party. She was there about an hour. She called me and said, "Dad, will you come and get me because I don't feel good?" So I went by. She was standing on the sidewalk when I went by. I picked her up. She got in the car. She looked fine to me. I said, Are you feeling all right?" She said, "I feel great, Dad. But they were doing stuff that wasn't right there. I didn't like it, and you wouldn't approve of it." That moral courage story is probably the strongest one I can remember. To have the self-confidence and self-respect to walk out and call me to come and say that she was sick so that she could get out of that situation. So that took some serious moral courage on her part. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide. So one of the things they said about in my biography was that I supported human spaceflight. One of the things we did was we ran the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. The Neutral Buoyancy Lab is a 100-foot by 100-foot by 40-foot deep pool, essentially. So in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, we built mock-ups of the International Space Station. We had to make sure that the mock-up of the exterior of the International Space Station was exactly like it was in space. We were in mission control for every spacewalk. We took pictures, we watched every piece of material on the outside space station, every handhold. Some of them get hit with little meteors, they get cut, and then they become off limits to the astronauts because they can cut open a glove. So under the water, we put the astronauts underwater on this mock-up, and we make their bodies neutrally buoyant, essentially weightless, as they move around the International Space Station. This is so important because if anything were to happen to an astronaut during an extravehicular activity, EVA is what NASA calls it, it's a spacewalk, then they would have to get back to the airlock so that they would be safe. So go to the next slide. So while we were there, on your left is Luca Parmitano. He's an Italian astronaut, first time in space during this mission from the European Space Agency. He was in the International Space Station. He and Chris Cassidy had already flown before, had done multiple spacewalks. As a matter of fact, Chris was a rock star when it came to astronauts. Navy SEAL. Right there in this picture, he's actually getting ready to go into the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. He trained most of the astronauts in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab so that they would be familiar with what the exterior of the International Space Station looked like. 1 hour into their second spacewalk, they had spacewalked the week before, they were actually out on different parts of the station. They could see each other, but their tethers were blocked by obstructions. This has become important when I get into the story a little bit. So About an hour into it, Luca commented that he felt water on the back of his neck. Chris asked him, "Are you working hard or are you sweating?" So sometimes in space when you're sweating, you feel wet. They're being cooled by an internal water system in this spacesuit that's cooling them in space. He said, "No, I'm not sweating that much." So remember, it's weightless. So the water floats as water beads in the air inside his helmet. So he took a taste of a piece of the water. It was cold and didn't taste like it was coming from his water supply or his water sack. And he said, "I feel like the back of my head's getting wet." So he's wearing a little, we call them Snoopy caps. You can see him on the left here. It's hard to see in this picture, but that has his communications gear. So the whole back of his Snoopy cap was wet. So Chris tried to make his way over to see what the condition was inside of his helmet. And he noticed that there was a lot of water in the helmet, but he couldn't actually return with Luca back to the airlock because they were separated, if you remember me saying that. So NASA terminated the spacewalk after Chris confirmed that he had water inside his helmet. Everyone felt at that point like Luca was really being stoic and tough and not saying anything. What they didn't know was the water had already invaded his ear cups inside of his Snoopy cap, and it had invaded his microphone so that he couldn't talk. And by the time he got back to the airlock, and he had to go hand over hand through the handholds and meet Chris at the airlock. When Chris got there, he looked inside Luca's helmet and he couldn't see anymore because the water was covering his eyes. So there was water droplets in his nostrils. He was breathing by blowing the water away from his mouth so that he could continue to breathe. So Chris added a sense of urgency to the situation. They got in the airlock. Chris jumped in after him. They repressurized every astronaut on the space station, including the Russians. So there were 4 standing just inside the spacewalk, inside the airlock. As soon as the pressure was depressurized, they opened the hatch and took Luca's helmet off, and about, close to a gallon of water spilled out on floated away, obviously, in the space station. So after that mission, and they came back, NASA obviously did a lot of engineering to figure out what had happened. And there was a fan water separator in the suit that had failed and caused water to intrude and invade his helmet. Chris came down to the Neutral Buoyancy Lab when he got back to Earth and gave every one of us an award because of the meticulous things that we had done to make sure that the mock-up was exactly like the station, because frankly, Luca couldn't see. He was just going hand over hand to get back to the airlock. So that's story number 1. And I got 13 minutes left.
Lots of, a little extra because we got time for questions. About 10 minutes for questions on top of this.
Can we go to the next slide? Okay, I call this story "Kidding Me in Somalia." So in Somalia, we were there in 1993 doing peacekeeping and peacemaking operations. Kid Manny was my combat co-pilot. He was the most junior guy in the detachment. So he flew with me. We weren't sure if he could shake yet. So Kid and I had been flying almost a year together when we got there. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Kid saved our lives on a number of occasions. But first, I'd like to show a 3-minute and 5-second video. I'm not sure everybody understands what peacekeeping's like and what was going on. So the video starts as we just got to Somalia during Restore Hope. Our mission there was to escort food shipments. They had been paying warlords to provide armed guards to food shipments, and all the food was getting hijacked as soon as it would get outside of Mogadishu. So we were doing both ground and air escorts. But this is what it was like on the ground in Mogadishu. This was put together by our combat photographers.
We spotted the ocean, the head of the trail.
That's our ship, the USS Wasp.
Where I'm going, so far away. Somebody told me this is the place where everything's better, everything's safe. Walk on the ocean, step on the storm, as becomes water, becomes gold. Half an hour later, packed up our things, said we'd send letters, and all of those little things. They knew we were lying. They smiled just the same. It seemed they all living, forgotten we came. Walk on the ocean, step on the storm, touch becomes water, gold becomes gold. Walk on the ocean, step on the storm, fish becomes water, gold becomes gold. Back at the homestead, when the year makes you drunk, people don't know you. Trust is a joke. Don't even have pictures, just memories of old. Grow sweeter each season, as we slowly grow old.
So, off the coast of Somalia, as we approached the first mission that we had, I was the mission commander. We were going to take the Marine Expeditionary Unit commander into a village in northern Somalia that hadn't been visited by Americans yet. Needless to say, for all the attack helicopters, I put wall-to-wall rockets on, and we were armed pretty heavy. Two of our Hueys were flying the new commander, and two of our Cobras were escorts. So Kid and I were in the cockpit, turned up, ready to go. We were armed up, ready to go, and we launched all the helicopters in front of us so I could watch them go. As I was pulling power to get in front of everybody else, we lost an engine. So when we lost the engine, the aircraft yawed, and I turned back towards the ship. The kid said, "Where are you going?" I said, "We lost an engine, kid. We're going back to the flight deck." I called the air boss and told him to clear the flight deck and launch the Alert 5 Cobras so that we had 2 Cobras escort the new commander on this mission. So as we were heading back to the ship, I started looking at my kneeboard because I had to do a weight balance and figure out if we could land with all the ordnance we had back on board back on the ship, because we had to pull the max amount of power to come into a hover when we got there. So while I had my head down doing a weight balance in my head, Kid showing incredible moral courage. Remember when I said he was the most junior guy on the deployment? So Kid was talking to me, and I wasn't hearing what he was saying because I was concentrating on the weight balance. And what Kid was saying was power. The reason he was saying that is because when I turned back towards the ship, I started a slight descent with the helicopter. and hadn't realized it because I wasn't paying attention. I was trying to figure out if we were going to be able to land back on the ship or not. So I looked up and heard, by this time, the kid was screaming power. And I saw the flight deck and the fantail of the ship going above us to our right. I was about 15 feet off the water when I finally realized that we were going to go into the water. So I dumped the nose of the Cobra, I lowered the collective, took the power off, gained as much airspeed as I could, and flew right across the top of the water so I could get enough airspeed so that we could get enough lift to start climbing again. So I climbed into a left-hand 360, coming back to the flight deck, and realized that the air boss hadn't cleared the flight deck. We now had a 53 Echo, the biggest helicopter in the world, in front of the flight deck, and one in the back. And I had a little slot in the flight deck to land into. So I already knew I wasn't going to be able to hover when I got there. So kid is calling out altitude, giving me airspeed, everything else. We did a no hover landing to the flight deck and made it back safely. So kid's courage actually saved our lives. What I didn't know was the MEU commander was on the Huey asking where we went, because we went out of sight. He thought we flew into the water. So anybody here seen Top Gun? So you remember that scene when he's standing in front of that Navy captain and he's yelling at him about all the rubber dog shit, the hum. So that was me in front of the MEU commander getting counsel about not jettisoning my ordnance before I landed back on the plane. So it was his way of telling me that he really cared about it. So, what was my next story? This is eyes over Mogadishu. We flew, Kid and I flew mostly at night. And then I stayed up there in the daytime and listened to the guys who were flying during the day. I liked it at night because you could see the tracers so you knew where not to fly. Next slide's at Huey over Mogadishu. We figured we were doing a lot of good when the kids started smiling and running after our vehicles, and you saw that. So we were really feeding them after a while. Then we went up into the Persian Gulf when the UN took over, and the 26 Pakistanis got killed, and those CNN reporters that you saw sitting in the Huey with us were also killed. And we went back in under the UN. It was a little bit different mission. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So, Fortitude. So where it starts, parents, school, your teachers, this amazing school, your peers. It's a basic sense of right and wrong that sets your character. You're going to live life's adventures. I've been fortunate. I volunteer for everything. And everyone says, don't volunteer, volunteer for everything. Despair and adversity, they're going to test your fortitude. Remember what I said about moral courage and physical courage? Physical courage is easy compared to moral courage. That's when you'll really be tested, but together they form fortitude. And then you'll form after a while a gut feeling. I call it a comfort level. So when we crossed the beach, I would tell Kid I thought it was going to be a good day or a bad day, just because I had a comfort level. You know, when the astronauts were up, when we were doing counterterrorism work, here at NORAD, we tracked Santa Claus. But if I felt like something wasn't going to go right, you get a little bit uncomfortable about it. That's what I mean by gut feeling. Doubt, uneasiness. A sense of values, that's really where it comes from. And you form your core values now. Mine are, I think I'm on the last slide, thanks. Mine are honor, courage, commitment. Those are the core values of the Marine Corps. I live by that every day. If you think about each of those things, it'll apply. I have some other stories, but I think I'm pretty much out of time. And I want to open it up to questions. And so I'll be at the 9th hour. So anybody got any questions? This is moral courage now. Ask a question. Right? Self-confidence. There's one over here. Who's got the question? Right there. Kid was his call sign. Okay, so his real name was Ken Manning. And because he was so junior and so young, his call sign was Kid. Any other questions? Yes. I started active duty in 1981, immediately after graduating from college. I graduated college, got commissioned, got married, and left. I actually grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Yes?
What was your favorite thing that you volunteered for?
So that's really hard. I have no regrets for anything that I've done. And sure, I made mistakes, everybody does, but every one of those things that I volunteered for had its own, what was in its way the best thing that I had ever done. Flying attack helicopters in the Marine Corps, commanding a detachment in Somalia, commanding a UAV squadron along the southern border of the U.S., finishing the construction of the South Pole Station, counterterrorism work, we can't talk about that, but and then obviously human space flight with NASA, amazing engineering at NASA. It's amazing, it's really smart people. I don't know how I got there. Okay, yes. That's correct. That's good. You want to repeat that for everybody? So the question was, how do you separate courage from fortitude, since courage seems instantaneous and fortitude is longer lasting? Did I get that right? Okay, so remember what I said about what I think fortitude is. It's moral courage and physical courage combined. Those things, moral courage, your values, your sense of values, your physical courage come from experience. They grow over time to build your fortitude, which in fact protects your integrity and your character. I'm seeing kind of like a blank stare. Now, think about fortitude as being a combination of moral courage, your integrity, your character, physical courage. I'm never going to get there. It's a good question. It's very philosophical, it's very intellectual, and I'm not very intellectual, so it's good for me to answer. Right. But your courage comes from your fortitude, and it's moral and physical. Okay. Why don't you stay for 9 hours? Yes, ma'am. You got to talk to somebody smarter like Thomas Aquinas or something. You can't answer. So the question was, your father is also a Marine veteran, which means that he's a Marine for life. And that besides Semper Fi, Semper Fidelis is the motto of the Marine Corps. Latin students in here? Semper Fidelis means always faithful. Good. So other than that, the Marines always abide by God, country, core. How does that relate to the values? So, God, country, core are the priorities. God's first, then the country. than the Marine Corps. I actually add family to that. So, God, country, Corps, family. It's kind of your priorities as you move forward in executing your core values in your life. Does that answer your question? Your dad will tell you that too, I think. Anybody else? Over here. So this question, how many people in here have parents who served in the military? Great. How many faculty members served in the military? Or had family that served in the military? Okay, so the question was, what made me choose the Marine Corps over the other services? So it's kind of a joke, but there is a professional military organization in the United States, it's the United States Marine Corps. So I heard a little chuckle. I originally had signed up for, this is a true story, a little bit about Fortitude. When I was going to the University of Pittsburgh, I signed up for the Navy to fly with them. Passed all the flying tests, and then I failed a course in college. Early Christianity broke my mother's heart. I went to the Marine recruiter and said, I want to fly. I passed all the tests. Marine gunny, by the way. A lot more squared away than the overweight Navy chief I had been talking to. And he said, we don't care about that failure, just retake the course. I said, I'm an English literature major. Does that matter? And he said, the Marine Corps will teach you what they want you to know. That's a true story. Next question. I think I'm out of time. Am I out of time?